Like unmarked graves, the portraits from the HOLTERMANN collection have laid dormant in the vaults of the State Library of New South Wales in Sydney for over 7 decades. They now rest in their cryogenic black and white state, seemingly without a past or a future. Their fixed gazes stare back at us as frozen subjects from history. But who were they? By researching each individual, and as more and more details are discovered, they will slowly regain the colour they once had, but more importantly, their personality that has eluded them for over 150 years. Come with us back in time as we attempt to bring these forgotten strangers back to life. While most of the subjects featured in the portraits within the HOLTERMANN collection appear rigid and uncomfortable, owing to the long exposure time during the photographic process, this gentleman otherwise appears noticeably relaxed, suggesting he is well accustomed to the procedure. His animated posture gives the impression that the photographer just happened to enter the room and simultaneously captured the relaxed gentleman in mid-conversation. However, the way he is positioned was carefully planned in order to maximise stability to avoid the dreaded motion blur. Each part of his anatomy is supporting another. He is firmly seated with one foot resting on the other chair, also creating the illusion of a relaxed posture, while his left elbow is firmly positioned on this leg. This arm is then extended with his hand resting on what appears to be a large book, which is central to the overall stability. It is jammed in tight between his right leg, which forces his foot onto the floor, while the book bears the weight of his right arm, which in turn supports his large head, eliminating any possibility of movement during the 8 to 10 second exposure time. To the trained eye, or if you have watched enough of these videos, you probably would have already noted that this picture is not a HOLTERMANN collection portrait, and as a result isn't the featured subject of this episode. But what is the relevance of it, and who was he? His name was André Adolphe Eugène Disdéry. He was a French photographer and was the father of small photographic images which were mounted on cards known as cartes de visite, or visiting cards. Disdéry's invention of the paper visiting cards were about the size of modern-day football cards and were exchanged amongst family and friends when visiting. He made this system of mass-production portraiture world famous and inspired photographers all around the world, including Henry Beaufoy Merlin, whose portraits are featured in the HOLTERMANN collection and subsequently in these videos. While all of the images contained within the HOLTERMANN collection are the hard glass plate negatives, there are, however, a small selection of them that are copies of the original paper-mounted portraits or cartes de visite. These small photographs were usually secured on a specially constructed stand with adjustable supports in order to photograph them for additional copies, usually made to order for the featured client, and were identified by the subject's surname. One such portrait is identified in the collection as a2823285 and is the featured subject of this episode. This gentleman was to enjoy the highest of highs as a successful businessman and even more, a public figure. But he was also to suffer the lowest of lows that was sadly not uncommon in one of the harshest environments in Australia. So, what were his highs? And what is a story in the colour within the HOLTERMANN collection without the sad lows? And who was he? Fortunately, the photographer, Henry Merlin, also marked these reproductions with the client's name, but the problem was that these copies were also originally glass plate negatives. So, the name also appears backwards. But as we also now know, it is a simple case of reversing the image to reveal that this client was Mr. K. Now that we know his name, a search of the Holtermann collection unearths the original portrait, therefore gaining a clearer picture of Mr. K. Subsequent research reveals that he was born James Anthony Lefroy K on the 7th of March 1848 in the Sydney suburb of Ryde to parents Joseph K and Martha Ann Lefroy. And with this first breakthrough, James transforms from a small anonymous sepia visiting card, then to a copy, and then the original glass plate, and now a subtle hint of the colour within. It's unclear as to when he arrived at Hill End, as the usual reliable names and occupations records contradicts with the dates when the portrait was taken. It's believed that these photographs were taken between 1872 and 73. However, the record reveals that the first recorded presence of James K in Hill End was not until 1875, 2 years following. But it was not unusual for people from outer districts to travel to Hill End to sit for a portrait, some from as far away as Mudgee, and even as far as Golgong. And further records suggests that this may have been the case with James. James Anthony Lefroy K married Catherine McCarthy, daughter of an Irish convict, on the 19th of March 1874. Although the marriage service was held in Hill End, Catherine's father was the publican at the Prospect Inn in Wattle Flat, and the first 2 of their 10 known children were both born in nearby Sofala in 1875 and 1876. So, it's possible the Kays may have taken a day trip to visit the American and Australasian photographic studio to have a picture taken, and in addition to possibly scope out a business opportunity. Upon settling in Hill End, James established himself as a grocer and appears to have further developed a friendship with one of Hill End's more famous residents named Henry Stewart. For those familiar with Hill End will recognise this name and his connection to the Great Western Store, located on Tambaroora Street, which still survives today as a private residence. In fact, it was here in the attached home of Henry Stewart that James and Catherine were married in 1874. James and Catherine would later acquire the store from Stewart, where they ran their business for many years. Between 1875 and 1887, Catherine, remarkably, gave birth to at least 9 known children, but record suggests that there were possibly even 10. That's almost 1 child every year, over a 12-year period. Throughout this period, the Kays earned the respect of the people in Hill End as popular grocers. But the respect that was shown also earned James a nomination for mayor in 1883, and as a result, he was unanimously voted by the people to fulfill this position. James's political career spanned 10 years, and within these years, he experienced the highest of highs as mayor, and also as an alderman alongside James Paxton and Louis Byers. But in addition, he also held the position as treasurer in 1888. However, as mentioned at the beginning of this story, what would an episode of The Colour Within the Holtermann collection be without the suffering? While James did enjoy the highest of highs, those times were without doubt overshadowed by the absolute lowest of lows. No parent should ever have to suffer the grief of burying a child, but one can only imagine the suffering of what James, but in particular of what Catherine, had to endure. Between 1875 and 1884, they buried 7 of their first 8 children. The first of these was Emily, who was born in Sofala in 1875. She died the following year in 1876. Following Emily, an unnamed male, who was also born in Sofala in 1876, died at birth. Their first child to be born in Hill End, and presumably named after their good friend Henry Stewart in 1877, sadly only survived for 1 year, dying in 1878. Catherine gave birth to another child in the same year, 1878, but Christina Kay died at birth. If this wasn't bad enough, they had now buried 2 babies, in 1 year and 4 in 2. By 1881, May Emily came along, but once again, they lost another baby. She died the following year, in 1882. Hilton Kay was born the next year in 1883, but again, would only survive just 1 year, passing away in 1884. And history would repeat itself in this same year, 1884, when Leslie came into the world and departed the following year in 1885. The only 2 children to have survived beyond 1 year was firstly Stewart, who was born in Hill End in 1879. Stewart Kay would not only survive adolescence, but would later graduate from Sydney University with distinction and became the resident medical officer at Sydney Hospital. He would later enlist in the Australian Imperial Army shortly before the outbreak of the First World War, where he reached the rank of Major with the Medical Corps. He saw action in both the Middle East and on the Western Front in Europe. He resided at Mackay in Queensland for many years before returning to Sydney, where he died on Christmas Day 1952 at the age of 73. Despite the tragic circumstances surrounding the Kay children, both Stewart and his younger brother, James Robin, lived into adulthood, and both were distinguished and well-educated men. James would also graduate university to become a teacher, and later would also be ordained as a priest, where he served the community of Lake Cargelligo, 420 kilometres to the west of Hill End. But the curse of the Kay siblings that let Stewart and James escape would later catch up with James, with sudden and furious vengeance. This is a coroner's report into the death of Reverend James Kay, dated August 25th, 1933. And although the cause of death is difficult to decipher, it translates as effects of gunshot wounds in the head, accidentally received. A more graphic and descriptive interpretation of the event explains that Reverend James, whilst retrieving his double-barrel shotgun from the rear of his truck, accidentally discharged both barrels simultaneously, the full force of which, striking him in the top of the head, killing him instantly. Fortunately, their parents James and Catherine would be spared any further grief of having to bury their only surviving children. Firstly, their youngest James of a fatal gunshot wound, and while Stewart passed away from natural causes at an otherwise respectable age, this Kay lineage would sadly come to an end on Christmas Day, 1952. Before his passing, James Anthony Lefroy Kay was instrumental, along with his good friend and fellow alderman Louis Byers, in establishing the Hill End Rifle Club, which put many of the Hill End and surrounding districts' young men in good preparation for the First World War. It also had an obvious influence on his 2 boys, Stewart and James's interest in the military and firearms in general. Whilst in the position of mayor, Louis Byers commissioned the planting of an avenue of pines and deciduous trees lining Tambaroora Road, many of which still survive today, almost 150 years after they were planted. Such was the respect for the Kays that James's wife Catherine had the honour of planting the 4th tree. The road would later be renamed Byers Avenue and remains as such today. Unlike the vast majority of his 10 children, it's quite obvious that James survived into adulthood, but not by much. James Anthony Lefroy K, grocer, alderman, treasurer, mayor, and father to 10 children, passed away in Hill End in 1895 at just 47 years of age. And now that your suffering is finally over, James, it's time to reunite with your babies and rest in peace.
Gentlemen, as a mark of respect for the Right Honourable James K., I ask you to ready your rifles, aim and fire. Thank you for watching the highs and lows of James Anthony Lefroy K.